Hey guys, Johan here. Blueprints are now in Rust and have changed the whole way the game is played and experienced. In this video I'm going to be showing you how to use workbenches, how to find scrap and make those blueprints. First up, let's talk about scrap. Scrap is a vital part for getting blueprints and making workbenches because you will need scrap to actually make the workbench and use that scrap to achieve a blueprint. Scrap can be found in barrels, tool crates, average crates, military crates, primitive crates, and elite crates. This means when you're walking down the road in Rust, you will almost definitely be getting scrap. The main purpose of scrap is used to research different items and then convert them into blueprints. You will need the blueprints for items like pickaxes, guns, and armor to actually gear up, level up yourself, and get better gear in Rust. Think of scrap as sort of the currency system in Rust. You need to keep collecting it because you can use it for trading and getting blueprints and researching items with research benches. Let's now move on to the research table. The research table is used to research items and weapons which you currently have and to convert them into a blueprint which you can learn to craft later. This is extremely important because you could have a level 3 workbench and be able to craft the most highest tier of weapons, but if you don't have the blueprint from, you're not crafting them. So you must find the blueprint for the item first so you can craft them later with the workbenches. Every item you put in the research table will require scrap to make the blueprint for it. The amount of scrap it will require depends on the level and the rarity of the item. So for example, for a revolver, it's not going to require as much scrap to research the blueprint compared to a C4 or an AK. Let's begin with the level 1 workbench. The level 1 workbench is a default blueprint and is used to craft all early tier items, including and not limited to the hatchet and pickaxe, crossbow and revolver. The level 1 workbench can also be used to speed up the crafting of items which don't require a level 1 workbench. This applies to all workbenches, and they all have the same effect of speeding up the crafting time of items under its tier. Now to actually craft the level 1 workbench, it will require 500 wood, 100 metal fragments and 50 scrap to craft. Now after a good run through the roads and it may be in a couple of gas stations, you will easily get 50 scrap. You just have to watch out for people trying to take you down. A new feature which was just recently added into the game is experimental researching. This means when you go up to a level 1, level 2 or level 3 workbench and you open it, you can now put in scrap and attempt an experimental research which will give you a blueprint of the item within that tier. The level 1 workbench requires 100 scrap to perform an experimental research to get a random blueprint in that level 1 tier. So for example, if I go up to a level 1 workbench and put in 100 scrap, I can click the experimental research button which will provide me an item in that level 1 tier. This means maybe a pickaxe, maybe an axe, maybe a revolver. Anything that requires that level 1 workbench to craft, it will provide a blueprint for that item. And also as well, once you get a blueprint for an item, for example the pickaxe, if you research that blueprint and try another experimental research, you will not get the pickaxe again. It knows what you have already learned and it isn't going to waste your scrap on repeating blueprints. Now let's move on to the level 2 workbench. The level 2 workbench is also a default blueprint but requires the level 1 workbench to craft. This means you can't skip ahead levels and you can't skip 1 and just go straight to 2 or go straight to 3, you must go in each step. The level 2 workbench is used to craft mid-game items such as better weapons, armor, ammo, medical supplies and placeables. To actually craft the level 2 workbench, it will require 500 metal frags, 20 high quality metal and 500 scrap. This is a big jump from the level 1 workbench which required 50 scrap. Now you have to get 500 scrap to make this workbench. The level 2 workbench also requires 300 scrap to perform an experimental research to get a random blueprint in that level 2 tier. And remember, with the level 2 workbench, everything in the level 1 tier and default blueprints are going to be crafting quicker. Now we move on to the level 3 workbench. This is the big and final workbench which is going to take a long time to get to, and by the time you actually make this, you should have a nice base set up with a lot of guns and a lot of resources to spare. The level 3 workbench is a default blueprint but requires the level 2 workbench to craft. The level 3 workbench is used to craft the highest tier of weapons, explosives, attachments, armor, placeables and ammo. Once you have this workbench down, you should be ready to raid and you should be ready to go out in battles. The crafting for the level 3 workbench is 1000 metal frags, 100 high quality metal, and 1250 scrap. The level 3 workbench requires 1000 scrap to perform an experimental research to get a random blueprint in that level 3 tier. So unless you have a bunch of scrap spare, you're not going to be doing a lot of experimental researches unless you really need to. Now you have the level 1, level 2 and level 3 workbench, you are ready to craft any item in those tiers if you have the blueprints for them. And like the last system they added to Rust, which was the component system, this is still in the game. They did not remove it, they implemented the blueprints and the components in the same thing. So now you require the scrap to get the blueprints, and once you have the blueprints and the workbench ready to craft the item, some items will still require the components to craft, like some guns which will require the rifle body and the semi-auto body. So now in Rust it's really recommended to go along the roads, destroy barrels, open crates to get the scraps and components to craft blueprints, research tables and the workbenches. You don't want to be building very far away from a road, gas station or rad town. You need to be close now to get the scrap to make the blueprints. Rust is no longer a game of farming trees, leveling up, or just getting components to craft some weapons. You need to go out and grind the scrap to get the blueprints. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope this video has helped you or informed you about the new blueprint system and how to acquire a workbench and get scrap in the world of Rust.